through Google.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
That's why I have my very glamorous picture there. It's like,
It,
like I really
it,
don't want that picture there, like
yeah.
whatever.
I got in the
But
same way, so yeah.
So
so
Marty, you
through
just
Google,
typed in
Right,
Zoom through Google
exactly.
and you put in the
well, I had
picture.
to log in through my Google account. Sure, there. And
Right.
then I
So
was
what
like,
it does,
I really don't
what
want
she
that
did, what
picture
Monty
there,
just
like
explained, it brings you
Got
up,
in the same
brings you to a
place.
login screen, and
So
then it
Marty,
says log
you
in
just
through
typed in
Zoom
Zoom through
or
Google.
choose Google.
You put
She
in
well,
chose
I had to
Google
log
as
in.
I did, and you got right in because she registered with her Gmail. It was easier.
Okay, so what they're saying is most everybody's went through Gmail, and so Zoom is something's going on with Zoom apparently. Um, okay,
What emails were used to register us as participants of the meeting?
and you used your email, Marty. You used your email to as a participant, right? Your email that you used in Google, same thing, same one. Okay. All right. Well, Anna's having difficulty getting on, and Sue, who's been to our meetings, is having difficulty. I can understand if it was maybe Anna, but Sue has been on this meeting pretty regularly. So, and she's having difficulties. So anyway, we have to get going. I've got this up and running on the social
John,
media.
a couple of things before you start. One, you and I can talk offline tomorrow and I could help you through setting this up. So that comes up easier. That's one. Two, I have to review thesis projects at the new school. So at 10:30, I'm gonna bail out and come back on while I'm traveling downtown.
Okay. All right, cool. I think it's 9:40. Just make sure you put your affiliates next to your name. I think we're going to have to jump right to the agenda. We're 10 minutes late already. I apologize. Don't know what this is about. I haven't changed any kind of back of the house management. So for some reason, it decided to act upon its own. Anyway, I'll pop up the agenda right now. Um, um, let's see, agenda. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is John Mudd. I'm the chair today with the Midtown South Community Council, and we didn't have I'll zip right through this. We didn't have a uh, prior meeting on policy or anything. That's been on hold. We haven't really grasped a policy to go after. The council highlights. I do need some board members and committee members. So if you're interested, please give a shout out. Okay. I need board members and committee members. We're doing a lot of interesting things, and I could use some help. Um, the web is going to be coming out in just about a week or so. So we got a new website I'm excited about. We'll skip the other highlights and we'll go to some special introductions. I know, is Jose here? Um, um, okay. Katie's coming late, she said. Alex, I think you're going to be part of the discussion later. You're going to highlight some advocate losses and wins,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
And
Uh,
John, I would like to just say a quick update about the figure skating coaches at Chelsea Piers
oh,
and our,
sure. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
yeah, like
Uh,
when it's appropriate.
why don't you do that real quick? It's just a few minutes,
Oh,
right?
okay, sure, sure. So, the coaches at Chelsea Piers, we formed a union, last August. 77% of the coaches, signed on to a letter to ask Chelsea Piers to recognize us. Which is pretty unheard of in the figure skating world. We believe we would probably be the first figure skating union in the nation. And the New York Times did an article on two of us, myself and another colleague, Angela Chang, and Chelsea Piers, retaliated against us and terminated us for union activity. So that was in the Sunday Times in the front page of the Metro section. So we're asking a lot of support from the elected officials. Brad Hoylman wrote a letter for us in support last fall. The borough president policy director wants to meet with us. We seem to be getting a lot of good support and, we love Chelsea Piers. I was gonna say, I've been there for like basically 30 years, I could have, practiced asbestos litigation, but I decided to like follow my heart to, teach figure skating, but we love it there. We're just asking, to have some input in the workplace for them to recognize us, really reasonable stuff. We're hoping things will get worked out. But I just wanted to let the community know. And if you guys have any questions, you can always ask me.
Yeah. So Marty, you have a union form now, right? And
Yes.
so it's got board members, all that set up, everything. And so
We have like an organizing committee. We have general assemblies. We vote democratically. We voted to go to the media. The New York Times was very, very interested in us. I think we're an example of independent contractors that are coming together to have, more of a voice in the workplace, which is important. And in figure skating, it's kind of unheard of because, we're always been independent contractors and act very like solo by nature. But this time we decided we need to put some kind of infrastructure in place because we've been basically negotiating with Chelsea Piers since 2011 for better contracts, better pay. So we just thought, we need to put something in place, really for now and also for future generations of coaches.
cool. Any questions, anybody? Okay. And then let's Rob, you recently did some work in DC. You want to give a quick update
Yeah,
on that?
just briefly, folks, there is a case that hit the Supreme Court on April 22nd. Johnson versus Grants Pass. Grants Pass is a locality in Oregon who is criminalizing people for sleeping on the street or sleeping rough, as some people call it, with no alternative available to them. Grants Pass doesn't have shelter to house people, but yet they will give them a $230 fine if they catch them sleeping on the street. Huge case in front of the Supreme Court, April 22nd. The case was argued in front of the Supreme Court. There were activists, organizers, plaintiffs in the case, all in front of the Supreme Court on that day. It was really a powerful gathering, in my opinion, who's been doing this work for about 15 years, where I saw these groups come together, right, around a single issue. Usually people carry their own path, and by that I mean we tend to work in silos in this country, right? So I'm an academic, I can't work with people from communities. I'm a legal expert or a policy expert, I can't work from people from communities. But this was one of the few times that I saw all of those paths come together, or those groups come together for a single cause. Very powerful in front of the Supreme Court. A very loud group to make sure that the court heard them. They started off with a die-in, saying people are going to die in the street. So about 200 people were sleeping on the street in front of, make-believe sleeping on the street in front of the Supreme Court. Very powerful, a lot of press. New York Times, Washington Post, any big paper covered the story. A lot of news agencies. I was actually on a DC local station live talking about the issue. So many interviews, but I really thought it was powerful. We won't know the decision until June, but we worked a similar case, and I just want to talk to people about the change in the Supreme Court. So there was a similar case called Martin versus Boise, which was an Idaho anti-capiting camping ordinance that some of us involved, myself included, took all the way to Geneva, to the UN. And we got a favorable ruling from lower courts here, and then it was taken to Court of Appeals, and the Ninth Circuit upheld the decision, and the Supreme Court refused to hear it. Very similar case this time with the change in the Supreme Court, they heard the case. So we have to pay attention to who's being put in the Supreme Court, right? And really make our voices heard. So thank you for the time, and thank you for allowing me to share, but I think it's a very important case that's going to be heard in this country. And, we often fight for a right to shelter in certain cities. I believe in a right to housing. They look very different. We have a right to shelter in this city, just to give you an idea. And when I started this work 15 years ago, there were 28,000 people a night in shelter. Today, there's about 85,000. When I started in 15 years ago, there were 325 shelters. There were close to 600. So right to shelter isn't a right to housing. They look very different. So I'll stop there. Thank you, John.
Well, any questions for Rob? Anyone? Yeah, I think that's a really important thing you did up there. What day was that? That was on a weekend, right?
April 22nd was a Monday morning. So we
Oh,
started
Monday
off the
morning.
week in front of the Supreme Court. So very powerful. And people were gathering the night before to get a position, right? So, you
Yeah.
know, a lot of police, they expected, I guess, maybe a violent protest, but we weren't violent. Nobody there was violent. And
Right.
eventually the police realized that this is a crowd just voicing their opinions, and you know, there was no aggression by the police, but it was it's very moving for me, somebody who's formerly homeless, to see that kind of support from a greater section of the societies.
Yeah, you were up there all weekend prior though. You went Sunday or something?
Yeah, I was there. Well, I got there the weekend before. There was, you know, a lot of the national groups, National Alliance to End Homelessness, National Low Income Housing Coalition, and the
Yeah.
group that I've been working with for years, the National Law Center on Homelessness, were very much involved in organizing the event. So I was there the weekend before.
Yeah, you look very organized. Look good. I loved your pictures. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Any questions? Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on. The next agenda was the Department of Buildings and also legislation updates. And Anna's on the phone here. If some of you just joining, for some of you that's just joined, Anna's on the phone here, and she can't seem to get on. Some issues with the Zoom or whatever. I don't know what it is. We've been doing these things for a while, and all of a sudden, a couple of people can't use the link. I'm not sure why. Anna, do you want to present next month and try, or do you want to try and weed your way through it now?
Either way works perfectly fine with me. I can give maybe a brief description as to what we do and share our contact information.
Okay.
And if any folks have any questions, they're welcome to reach out.
And then come back next month maybe and do what you had in mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sounds great. Go ahead. Can everybody hear Anna okay? Did everybody hear her fine? Okay. Anna, go right ahead.
Perfect. All right. So my name is Anna Placinata. I am a tenant liaison at the Office of the Tenant Advocate with Department of Buildings. We are a unit that assists tenants who are experiencing construction-related harassment, mostly focusing on a document that needs to be submitted to our agency whenever construction work is happening in an occupied building. That document is called the Tenant Protection Plan. And our unit just pretty much makes sure that the construction sites are in compliance with the Tenant Protection Plan, and if for any reason they are not, we receive complaints directly from the tenants who are living in those occupied units and are experiencing issues with the ongoing construction. Our unit also conducts audits of tenant protection plans to determine if the protections listed on that document are sufficient for the scope of work. This unit consists of an executive director. Her name is Sarah Desmond. We also have an assistant chief plan examiner and other plan examiners that conduct the audits. We have 2 tenant liaisons, myself and my colleague. We also work with a number of inspectors who go out and respond to the tenant complaints, and we also have a data analyst. So, like I said, we respond to construction-related complaints and other issues that may fall within the jurisdiction of our agency, the Department of Buildings. So mostly the inquiries that we receive from members of the public, you know, it's complaints about the construction sites failing to comply with the TPP or any other type of unsafe construction elements that may be on site. We also receive complaints of failure to post the tenant protection plan notice or another document that's called the State Construction Bill of Rights. Both of these documents are meant to kind of notify tenants of the construction work that will be taking place and provide contact information and job numbers so that tenants have the ability to go on our database, research it on their own, and then if they have any questions, they can bring that up either to us or to building management or to the general contractor. We receive complaints about insufficient tenant protection plans and inquiries pertaining to the department processes. So, for example, what are the requirements to post or deliver the tenant protection plan on site? Okay, here we go. So we also do receive complaints that don't fall within our jurisdiction, things regarding eviction proceedings or tenant rights or security deposit or lease issues, things like that don't necessarily fall within our jurisdiction, but we always do our best to point tenants or just the callers in the right direction. That way they can get the assistance they need from the appropriate agency that their complaint falls under their jurisdiction. So we do guide them as best we can so that they can get their concerns responded to. And there are some elements of the tenant protection plan. I'm a little upset that we're having such technical difficulties. We put together a very informative PowerPoint, but happy to join next month and share it. But we kind of went into detail on the elements of the tenant protection plan and what it's supposed to pretty much outline as to how tenants will be protected during the course of the construction. Our website is also very informative, so if folks care to visit the DOB website, I highly encourage it. And it has a whole section on our unit and what we do. We also collaborate with a lot of other city or state agencies just based on tenants' concerns. If their concerns kind of fall within multiple jurisdictions, we do our best to coordinate maybe joint inspections or separate inspections so that each agency can respond to the concerns that fall within their team.
Hannah, when it comes to the public, I didn't even know about your agency, by the way, and Alex brought it up, and we're really happy to have you. But with a lot of agency, DHCR and these other agencies, it's very difficult to communicate with them from the public side. Do you're well staffed, and besides just the people you mentioned, and you're able to take those calls? Is it easy to pick up the phone and give you a call and get some answers or help?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our phone number and our email address are publicly available on our database. As far as well-staffed, that's a little difficult to answer. It's only 2 tenant liaisons and my executive director who deal with the public, mainly deal with the public. So, the volume of calls and emails that we get compared to our number of staff is one far outweighs the other. So we do try to respond as quickly as we can. But, obviously just staffing issues could create a slight delay in our response. But we try our very, very best to get someone out there as soon as possible because it is crucial for the inspectors. In order to take enforcement action, the inspectors must be able to see any sort of violating condition at the time of the inspection. So it's very important on our end to coordinate those inspections as soon as possible, shortly following when the complaint comes in.
So we could essentially, as a public, we could advocate for more staff, advocate more funding. That would probably help you, right? That's what we could do as a group. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I would love to learn more about what your team does as well. If that's something that falls within your capabilities, I'm more than happy to have a lengthier conversation about that, and include my executive director and see what can be done. But the more the merrier, absolutely.
Cool. And sometimes you'll have people, you know the situation with landlords. Sometimes they let the building dilapidate purposely in order to drive people out. That's part of their playbook, and this happens in a lot of apartment buildings that are tenement buildings and rent controlled, and it's more directed there. It's actually happening in the NYCHA facilities. They've been keeping up with the maintenance. They have all kinds of reasons why, and then you see this also even in other buildings, that are, you pay a decent rent to. How do you tackle that, or or tell me a little bit about what you see comment on that, if you would.
Sure. I want to talk about NYCHA maybe a little later on, because NYCHA is kind of its own world. But when it comes to just, privately owned buildings that are undergoing construction and tenants are experiencing just the impacts on their quality of life due to the construction, there's a number of steps that we can take, right? So we just, based on our conversations that we have with these tenants who reach out, we ask them a number of questions to see how we can best assess. So, for example, if there are rent controlled or rent regulated units in a building, it may be, just based on what their concerns are, it may be worth, reaching out to DHCR and seeing what they can do. If, for example, if there's a noise complaint, DOB doesn't handle noise, but DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, does handle noise. So we would reach out to them and let them know. Maintenance issues are mostly handled by Housing Preservation and Development. So we would reach out to them to see, hey, we're getting these calls from these tenants. What's your background? What have you inspected? What enforcement action has been taken? And first and foremost, we always encourage tenants to place those 311 complaints. It's crucial, because in order for them to get quick responses, those complaints must be in. And oftentimes tenants like to wait until they get in touch with members of our team to place those complaints. And again, it could potentially cause some delay. And by the time that we get back to them, the issue can be gone. So we highly, highly encourage tenants to place those 311 complaints. Either give them a call, or 311 has a very informative website where you can report some problems, not all. I will say that some complaints do require a phone call, just because they like to get a little more information from the complainant. But a lot of the complaints can be placed online. Some could be made anonymous. Some cannot, because if the problem exists inside of a particular unit, let's say, obviously the inspector would need to know what unit it is and contact information in order for the inspector to gain access, which is another huge element.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Anna, I'm going to maybe, it sounds like you have some interesting insights on the NYCHA. So why don't we put that on next month's agenda, and we'll do your PowerPoint next month, and we'll get more into this. Sometimes this can help, that this little glitch, because next month people have heard you, and then they might bring more to the table and questions. Unless someone has any questions now, we're going to kind of move on.
One fast question.
Is that okay with you, Anna?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, Alex, you were going to say?
One fast question. Before, the tenant advocate's office didn't accept videos. Is that still true? Videos from tenants as evidence.
Did you hear that?
It was a little muffled. I couldn't understand it.
Alex, speak up a little bit and say that again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before,
Okay.
they didn't accept videos, Office of the Tenant Advocate. Is that still true, that you don't accept videos from tenants?
Well, tenants are welcome to send us videos or photos showing the on-site conditions. And we use that as part of our inspection request to the appropriate units or agencies. However, our inspectors cannot use evidence taken by tenants in court. The inspector has to take their own evidence while he or she is on site, especially if enforcement action is being taken, because once that violation is issued, it goes to oath court, and the inspector may only use the evidence collected at the time of the inspection to defend the violation in court. So tenants are more than welcome to send us evidence. However, we can't take enforcement action based on that evidence.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Quickly. Anna, that was wonderful. I'm glad you stuck with us here. And so is that good for an agenda item, NYCHA, and your PowerPoint, and then any other questions? Is that good for next month?
Sure. I mean, just to touch upon NYCHA, just briefly,
Mhm.
NYCHA does have their own team that, you know, they intake their complaints, and they have their own procedures in place to respond to maintenance issues. So oftentimes, you know, the times that we receive complaints from NYCHA building, you know, we can input it into our system, but it will get routed back to NYCHA. So it's very dependent on the type of complaint that's coming in. That's why I think NYCHA is just like a whole different world that, you know, oftentimes may not fall within our jurisdiction. But again, we do our very, very best to respond to the tenants' concerns and you know, send out an inspectors whenever it's applicable.
Okay. All right. Good. Very good. Any questions? Anybody? Okay, Anna, thank you so much.
Thank you all, and I'm sorry for these technical difficulties.
No, it's not, certainly not your fault. I'm sure it's sometimes Zoom has a mind of their own. Okay, Katie, yeah, Katie is here. Are you with us? There you are. Okay. Nice to see you. Doing some excellent work. Kate, by the way, everybody put their affiliates in so everybody knows who each other are. So, you know, they might want to contact you or want to reach out to you. And then, Katie, go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about the losses we have. I shouldn't say it that way, right?
I'm not going to frame it that way. No, I mean there were some losses and some gains. So, hey everybody, I'm Katie LaSalle with Right to Counsel. I think most folks on the call know who we are, but we are a statewide coalition fighting to end all evictions, and we have a number of pieces of legislation that we're fighting for at the state level, but our main priority this past year has been statewide Right to Counsel. So I'm going to share back a little bit about what happened in the state budget. I'm going to be pretty Right to Counsel focused because that's what we've been working on. But quite a lot of what actually happened in the budget had to do with good cause eviction and with some gains for real estate. So I know there's other folks on the call. If people have questions about good cause eviction, I know there's some people that have been working on that, I think, more closely than I have, where I can do my best to answer people's questions. But in brief, so on Right to Counsel was not included in this year's budget. For folks that don't know, the Right to Counsel legislation that we're fighting for would establish the right to a free attorney for all tenants facing eviction across New York State. This is such a fundamental right that, you know, without it, if you've ever been in housing court before for yourself or for other folks, you'll know that really our rights on the whole are not upheld. We don't have right to counsel. It's really what we call the right to protect all other rights. And I do think, and on a positive note, that the state legislature really understood that for the first time this session. We saw them fighting for this legislation in a way they just had not in previous years. Both the Senate and the Assembly it was severely amended, but a severely amended version of Right to Counsel in their one house budgets. And we heard that they were fighting for this amended version really up until the very end of budget negotiations, like the Saturday that that the budget was released. We heard people were still fighting for this bill. However, the governor was not interested in even passing this severely amended version of Right to Counsel. So for context, we were fighting for a true right for everybody in New York State. The legislature was fighting really to set up a new state agency that might theoretically one day implement a right to counsel, but which sort of in the paradigm that they were pushing had no strings attached, no mandate to fund or enforce a right to counsel in the long term. So that was like their extremely watered down nothing burger that they were fighting for. The governor wouldn't even consider that. And that's the sort of intel that we've heard consistently, that she really was the problem. And you know, it does square with what we're seeing broadly in the landscape of tenants' rights and our campaigns. And so this is a really challenging for us. We have to work next year to really think about her as a target, how to move her. Not only was she not open to a severely watered down right to counsel, but she did something last minute that kind of seems small, but to me, I think it's really significant. So I do want to flag it for folks. Every year, many civil legal services around New York State are funded through the IOLA fund. And I'm not going to get into all of what it is, but it's like a fund that has historically funded civil legal services, really essential funding for civil legal services. Right now, as I'm sure you guys know, if you've ever tried to find an attorney to represent you, we have a serious shortage. And so this funding is crucial. It's already, you know, the context is already quite a scarce environment for funding for civil legal services. So the governor, she had actually proposed earlier this year that she was going to sweep some of that money into the general fund. And legal providers were really upset, as were tenants' rights organizations. And we all pushed her and we said, this is totally unacceptable. Like, why would you take funding from something very needed, very scarce, put it in the general fund? And she backed off and she said, I'm not going to do that. At literally the nth minute, like the day before the budget passed or 2 days before the budget passed, she pushed really hard to sweep, I think it was $55 million total from IOLA. $40 million of it went to fund the HOP program, homeowner protection, and $15 million went to eviction legal services. So it's very strange. It's like, I don't know why she felt she needed to take money away from basically tenant defense to put it towards tenant defense and towards homeowner protection. She basically kind of moved funding around to make it look as if they had like allocated funding for new funding for eviction legal services, but in fact, it was just swept from another pot. So this was something I think really concerning in addition to her not supporting right to counsel. I think previously we had thought of the governor as someone who does at the least support eviction legal services. She had actually allocated $35 million for a number of years in a historic allocation, new allocation for upstate eviction legal services. So that had given us a positive feeling, like maybe this is an issue she might be more progressive on. I think this IOLA sweep says a lot about just her really total disinterest, actually, in supporting even the most basic ask that our movement is making, which is like fund eviction legal services. The funding that we're even talking about, $50 million, is really a drop in the bucket when you consider that we need about $1 billion every year to fund a full right to counsel in New York State. So that's what happened with right to counsel. Again, it was really disappointing, but I also think that we saw advances in a way that we had never had before. To have both one houses be calling for some version of our legislation. We got a majority of co-sponsors in the Senate for the first time. These are in some ways symbolic gestures, but they speak to the power that we've built, and that there really is a growing consensus in New York State that we need a right to counsel. So what did pass was a housing deal, a package that you, I'm sure, have read all about in the news, or maybe you worked on the campaign for Good Cause. But what it included was a severely watered down version of Good Cause eviction. And I will say, I will send, I'm sure you have it, John, and can put it in the notes, but I'll send it if not, that Housing Justice for All put out a statement about this. You know, they're the major coalition fighting for this legislation. They condemned it. I'll say, however, that this new Good Cause eviction, while it's severely watered down, has lots of exceptions in it. It's going to cover a lot of people who previously were not covered and didn't have lease renewal. And it's going to protect a lot of people from rent hikes. And so this was in some ways a loss. We've actually, as a movement, publicly really talked about it as we've condemned it, both our coalition and Housing Justice for All. But I do want to say personally that many, many of my friends actually have been reaching out to me to say, I'm covered by Good Cause eviction. So I think it is a big deal, and we need to especially think about it in the context of this governor. She is not someone she really resisted this, and it was the fight of the tenant movement that really got this across the finish line. However, there were also some major, major concessions to landlords that she's been pushing all along, and that the real estate industry has been fighting for. in particular the session. So there was a partial rollback to the incredible gains that we won in 2019 in the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act. And I just want to super emphasize that. I think this is a real problem with this legislature, is that they are passing great things and then rolling them back like, you know, a handful of years later. It's really shameful, and it's really chaotic legislating. So this rollback raised the individual apartment improvement, the IAI cap, which limits how much landlords can hike rents to compensate for renovations. And we know that this loophole has been continued to be severely exploited. It also raised the floor area ratio cap in New York City, so allowing our city to rezone for larger apartment buildings. And then it replaced the 421A tax incentive with a new tax incentive called 485X, which has the potential to exempt developers from taxes for up to 40 years. So definitely, you know, the context of the victory of good cause eviction, the partial victory, is that it came with these other these victories for landlords. And we are, I know, as a movement, both organizing now to help people use good cause eviction to win a right to counsel, because we know we need a right to counsel for people to raise the good cause eviction defense in court. So we're fighting for a right to counsel. We're fighting for an just implementation of good cause, and to have upstate cities opt into good cause. And we are also fighting really right now and campaigning to educate our base about these gains for landlords and how they're going to impact us. So that's where we're at. And I will just stop there. I've been talking so much, and see if folks have any questions. And if not, pass it back to John.
That 428 or 421A is a conversation unto itself. And I know Lisa and Alex are on here. Anything to add or questions? Anybody?
For me, nothing to add in particular, but I did just want to take this moment to introduce myself. I'm Elisa Martinez. I'm the new community organizer at HCC. You will see me at all of these HCC and WESNA related events. So I'm looking forward to getting to know everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa.
A question for Katie.
Yeah.
So the 15 million that was swept, is that going to be split between New York State and New York City?
Yeah, so just to back up a little bit, because I feel like not everyone is so in the weeds as we are. So again, there was 50 million, which was actually what they allocated last year for eviction legal defense. Last year, it was $40 million for upstate, which by upstate, I'm sorry, I really mean everywhere outside of New York City. So $40 million for outside of New York City, $10 million for New York City. This year, it was also $50 million, but 35 million of it was, you know, reallocated. And then that 15 million, which is for, we think, still probably 10 million for New York City, 5 million for outside of New York City. That 15 million is what they swept out of Viola. So they basically moved, they're pretending as if they're allocating $15 million for eviction legal defense, but actually they're just like stealing it from another fund for eviction legal defense. So that's where that 15 million. Yeah, I mean, it's such a weird governing, honestly. It's like $15 million is not that much. I don't know why they needed to sweep that out of Viola, or why they needed to take eviction legal services funds and give it to homeowner protection for $40 million. Like, that seems like money they could have come up with somewhere else. So yeah.
Wouldn't you say, Katie, wouldn't you say that they're just trying to still slim down the core people that needs help right here, and particularly in the city, but if we can get rid of the low income, get rid of the tenement buildings, and keep building and keep, you know, filtering all that stuff upwards, don't you think that's part of the whole core focus? What brought that on? Does that make sense?
Explain more. You're saying you're talking about gentrification.
My feeling, I'm sorry I didn't make that clear, but my feeling is we know we got a class war happening, no question. I don't think I that can be disputed. So, and they're attacking us in severe ways, and these are another piece of a way to attack us. So if they start working from the bottom up, and less people are going to pay attention, and then as as you get up to the people who have properties and houses and so forth, they're not going to be so involved like we are until it hits them. Does that make sense? And it's just another way of like a sneaky workaround or sneak attack from the bottom.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I mean, I'll just say I think it's very clear the kind of dynamics around class warfare and counterinsurgency that we're in right now. Like we are in a reactionary moment, actually, where we had incredible gains with Right to Counsel in 2017, with HSTPA in 2019, with the series of eviction moratoriums throughout the pandemic. And we're seeing this moment, it's like so clear where the landlords and their cronies in Albany are trying to take away the tools that we've been using to organize, and they're trying to weaken. I mean, this whole thing about all the exceptions with a good cause eviction, they're trying to make it as hard as possible for people to use this as an organizing tool. The more, obviously, as a tenant, it's hard to use if you don't know if it applies to you and you have to go to have an attorney to go raise it in court, all this stuff. But also, as organizers, it makes it really hard to sort of use it as an organizing tool if it's confusing and people don't know if it applies to them and all these things. And so I think all of this, absolutely, we're seeing kind of the weight of reaction and backlash. And to me, in a way, it speaks to our successes in the past decade that we've made major gains, and the landlords are trying to claw what we've won back from us. So we need to fight. Winning. We always say this: like, winning is the first step. And we need to keep fighting to defend our rights. And we know that they're not going to stop. And right now they have people installed, Democrats at every level in the state, who are defending the interests of property owners. And so, anyways, preaching to the choir. But I think that's kind of what you were saying, right,
Yeah.
John?
Yeah. And what you do is you do very well. You coalesce people. Can't say it's always perfect, but you try to get that hone that message. And I love your meetings, by the way. I do. I wish I could attend them all the time, but we all are thin, right? So if anybody wants to be a liaison and attend these meetings for the council, that would be wonderful. And again, I need some committee members and board members. Anything else for Katie?
John, this is Rob. Just quickly, hey, Katie, good morning. I just want to thank Katie and the Right to Counsel for the work that they do. I think what is happening here reminds me of something that has happened at the federal level, or that we've been arguing about for a long time. So there is a mortgage tax deduction for wealthy homeowners while you're pulling back money from public housing, right? It's a contradiction in a way. So we're supporting wealthy homeowners and we're neglecting poor people. And I think that's the way this looks to me and appears to me, right? She's pandering to the people who are her perceived constituency that are going to come out and vote, right? Let's be real about this, right? Poor people in the neighborhood, they ain't going to vote for me. So let me go towards the people I will vote. It's challenging, right? And it's hard to figure out, but, it looks the same no matter where you see politicians. I hate to paint people with a broad brush, but it's something that you probably heard from me, Katie, before. Like, you could have the greatest message before you go into the tower, right? Into City Hall or the Capitol office, but it's a meat grinder once you go in there and you come out like sausage, like all the rest. Same message, same consistency. So, I guess it's my way of venting a little bit, but I've seen it all before. So I do have to jump off this call from visual folks and work my way down to the new school, but I'm going to come back on my phone on the way down to the new school.
Okay, great, because we have Montague Harvey coming on next, and we're going to spend the rest of the meeting with Harvey. Great. If we're good with Katie right now, if nobody has any pressing questions or Any last words, Katie?
No, just adding on to Katie's presentation. Starting August 20th, there's going to be a requirement for landlords to give notice to tenants, whether they're protected by good cause or not. So don't assume that the landlords are going to tell the truth on that notice. Required notice starts on August 20th.
Great. Thanks, Alex. Alex is always there. He does some great research, and he's pays a lot of attention to detail, and we're happy to know Alex for sure. And okay, let's move on. Basil, right? Basil? You need a little control, right? You want a little co-hosting ability, right?
Yes, please. That'd be great.
Okay. There you are. I found you. Make co-host. Okay. Harvey's going to talk about some urban design. We've been quite involved with a coalition, and we've been basically, I always say we've been a gnat on an elephant's back, but the Bernardo and the governor is pushed hard through the pandemic, pushed hard to demolish this whole Penn area, and they want to tie it in with the Penn Station. There's a lot of work we did as far as getting the message out, and it was realized that we don't need Bernardo to redo the Penn Station. And anyway, I met Harvey just recently, and he's going to speak about his conceptual ideas of. And my push, of course, is to have a little balance and have housing and real affordable housing, and I think that's really important. And recently, it was questioned, okay, how would you put housing right there in smack in front of the Penn Station? And I says, well, maybe you don't put it smack in front of Penn Station, but I always thought that the Penn Station, the transportation system, should fit into a community, not the community to fit into the Penn Station. So however that can be conceptualized, I think it would be good for us to find an idea, a purpose, a focus, a strategy that puts the people out front and not so much their design and commercial and profit plans. But anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to Harvey and Basil. Did I say your name right, Basil? Bayless?
It is Bayless, yes.
I'm so sorry, I butchered your
No
name.
worries.
Okay, so Harvey and Bayless, go ahead.
Yeah, well, good morning. Thank you, John, and the Midtown South Community Council for your invitation to present my concepts for housing, urban design, and Penn Station. I am a New Yorker. I grew up in Queens. My father had his office in Midtown Manhattan, so Midtown Manhattan is very familiar to me. Later, I lived in Westchester, and Grand Central Station was my destination. Now, for the past 12 years, I commute into Manhattan from New Jersey. I arrive at Penn Station. I can definitely say Penn Station is no Grand Central. I was reviewing the various proposals for Penn Station project. Some to make it safer, some prettier, some more accessible, and some reminiscent of the past. Some of these proposals, in my mind, do not fully address the challenge of what New York wants Penn Station to be. What is missing is an holistic approach to the challenge, or what our profession does, urban design. I want to consider the needs of the city as a whole, the needs of the community, the needs of the people. It must be a world-class destination, a place to live and work, a place to shop and browse, a place to relax and recreate. I propose my project, PSAUD, Penn Station Area Urban Design, with this as my goal. I had meetings with community leaders, proponents of various concepts, and my professional colleagues. I have prepared this presentation to address the issues surrounding the growing need for housing, especially housing for the elderly population, so we can age with dignity, to enhance and revitalize our urban environment. This is how to make Penn Station live again. So conceptualizing better landscapes for the public. This is my proposal. So we can, go ahead. Next, Bayless. Okay, good. Some of the areas of discussion, either now or at the end, I'll just read these quickly. Affordable housing needs, demographics, elderly, single occupancy +1, universal design. I think you know what universal design is, but I'll explain that later. Penn Station area, PSAUD, determining appropriate use of existing and new buildings for transportation, housing, healthcare, education, recreation, entertainment, and business. So the urban design involves all of these elements, not just a train station, not just apartments. Housing production costs with modular and prefabrication and labor and supplier agreements. In other words, approach the problem or the challenge from different angles, reduce the cost, reduce architects' fees, find ways, create new government programs, find ways to make housing more affordable. Zoning as a tool for development incentives in urban design and planning. And then John and I have been talking about the 7A HPD, understanding implementation, who is qualified to manage and what are the advantages. And then citizens, municipal agencies, developers, architects, and urban designers and planners, promoting development of affordable housing. So let's go forward. This is
So hold on, Harvey, your presentation, you're showing up big on the screen. I don't know if everybody else is seeing it that way, but your slide is not, something's going on.
Don, it's you because you have to change your view.
Did not see it?
No, I see it, and I see everybody on the side little. So John.
Oh, you see it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's you. John.
I see it clearly.
Okay, so then it's on my end then. Okay, then proceed by all means, and I'll.
Okay. So in my project, it's an ongoing project. I started a year ago. It started 1 year ago or so. And it's ongoing. I'm kind of at a midpoint. I intend to continue, but this is my timeline. And I call it 1616, 16 years, $16 billion. So the first thing is present an urban planning concept. And I presented that to our subcommittee I work with of AIA called DZC. And that was done last year, and now today, MSCC. The second issue is Madison Square Garden, moving to a new location in 2 to 9 years. That's part of my proposal. Understanding the phasing and scoping of the Gateway Project 2035. I worked in Boston for 35 years. I was part of the Big Dig. Parsons, Brinkerhoff were the engineers. I understand the process of how a tunnel and a transportation project, moves forward. And I want to understand a little bit more about Project 2035 as it moves forward. It's just the beginning stages. Provide safety and ADA upgrades to existing Penn Station. So you'll see a timeline in the next slide, how these relate to each other. Design a phased project with Penn Station. I have proposed a Penn Station North and a Penn Station South. Construction of 31st Street Galleria with shops and services, and a la Victorio, you'll see a slide of the Italian commercial interior street in Italy, in Milan. Designed for through-running trains, high-speed trains, and for added platforms. Again, this is an ongoing thing. I think we're all learning about what through-running trains is and how to accomplish it, and whether it's appropriate for here. Certainly, it's appropriate and it's been used in Paris and London and other places. We can talk about through running trains and learn more about it. Implement relocation and mitigation for Block 780 fair and equitably. During the governor's proposal, Vernato's now outdated proposal, Block 780 was taken by eminent domain. If it's necessary, in my proposal, it might be. We have to figure out a fair and equitable way to do it. And then the next area of concern or next step is the construction of Penn Station, PSS, I call it. It's Penn Station South. And then construction of affordable housing. And I don't think then, but starting this year and running for 10 or whatever years, consider the affordable housing that is related to the Penn Station area and the Midtown South area. I have been a proponent of housing since I started in the profession, and you'll see one of my elderly housing projects illustrated in the next couple of slides. Then the construction of Penn Station North. Why is that further down the road? Because if Madison Square Garden is going to move and we give them time to relocate and rebuild, we're going to have to rebuild Penn Station North above ground. And the complete project, hopefully, is by 2040. And that may be optimistic, but 2040 is our goal. Okay. The next, please. This is the timeline. You can just glance at this briefly, but this is how the projects interrelate and how they dovetail. I'm very accustomed as an architect and urban designer to working with phased projects. When one phase starts, the other phase can pick up. One ending is dependent on the other beginning, or so on forth. So this is my concept. This will be in the record, so you can look at this. But it goes from now until 2040. All right, this is what I call a massing plan. This is urban design. You can see, I'll just identify, Penn Plaza on the north. It's a Vernato building, Penn Plaza 2 on the east. That's existing, it's being renovated. 7 Penn on the east as well. That's an existing office building, the headquarters for another developer, the field organization. And I've spoken to them and they're almost fully tenanted and they want to stay. It's their headquarters. And then you have Moynihan Station, which was recently renovated to the northwest. Adjacent to that and behind Penn Plaza is Penn Station North, and dotted in there is Madison Square Garden, and it's going to stay there for a while we phase our project around it. And then there's Penn Station South, controversial. Can we build it there? And then I have a new park called New Park, and that's open space, breathable space, a place where people can recreate, can dine, can enjoy we can even create a urban farm and grow vegetables and fruits. And our Penn Station North and South will become a winter garden. You'll see illustrations coming up of my concept of what the space will look like. It's going to be a winter garden. But the key to this whole thing is what I call the shopping galleria, going from, you see the arrow on the east, southeast. 31st Street now becomes a galleria. This is the spine of the project. It links all the pieces together, the office buildings, North and South Penn Station, Moynihan Station, and the park. And you can envision that with shops, with museums, with displays, with artwork, with restaurants that feed out onto the Southwest Park, New Park, and to the sunlit park. So, and then, and I must not forget, where we demolished, unbeknownst to our, unwillingly demolished the Penn Hotel. I'm proposing that we use that site for affordable housing. That's one of the sites for affordable housing. It's vacant, and we just have to convince the developer that this is the right thing to do. Next slide, please. This is just the same plan, but in colors. So these are the standard colors that developer, our urban designers use. Red is commercial, yellow is residential, institutional or Penn Station transportation is the dark blue or purple. The light blue is glass enclosed Galleria space, and the green obviously is the park. So this just gives you another layer of uses. And then the next one, this shows the site context. Now this shows an aerial view of all the pieces, how the city looks in that area, what the massing of the buildings is like. And to the, you have the I forget what you call the yards, yeah, Hudson Yards to the northwest, and the Galleria will tie into the line, the line over. What do you, someone give me the name? High Line. The proposal is to take the High Line, which connects right now to Hudson Yards Towers and shopping area, connect it into a second level and have it lead into the Galleria going all the way to 7th Avenue. So the High Line now becomes part of the spine of the new Penn Station. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, this is a sense of space. Instead of designing this, this is a conceptual presentation. This is not a architectural design. So these spaces are ones that I think show what the spine and what the new Penn Station, the Winter Garden, can look like. So one is the Crystal Palace in London. You know that one. The Galleria Victoria Emanuele in Milan. That's a fantastic space. And then a contemporary, a friend of mine, Safdie, Moshe Safdie, his office is in Boston. He was the architect for Habitat in '67. And that is the Peabody Museum, how we created light and area space for that. And the next one. Okay, now you all know Bucky Fuller, and you don't know Briato, but these are ideas of how to create an enclosed space, and it's been done. So Buckminster Fuller, New York, designer, futurist, designed this, and Friato in Germany, his idea was creating enclosed spaces with tensile structures, and these two things add another more contemporary view of how you can enclose the new Penn Station. What else? Bayless, please.
You say enclosed Penn Station. You're talking about parts of it. You're not talking about the whole. I mean, you've got the Madison Square Garden, new Penn Station.
This is for, well.
Or are you?
This is for the Winter Garden, the whole Penn Station and the Galleria. I'm proposing a Winter Garden, an interior space where plants are growing, where people can enjoy the space 12 months out of the year. And Madison Square Garden has to eventually be relocated. I wrote a letter to City Council supporting the fact that Madison Square Garden should move. It's unfortunate that 60 years ago, Penn Station was demolished. And now is the time to reconsider, now I don't like to talk about what to do with other people's property, but there's been a lot of discussion about moving Penn Station. And my proposal is ultimately it should move. I have it in 3 to 9 years moving, and then we will rebuild Penn Station North where Penn Station is right now. It'll be part of a really large urban interior space. But we can talk about that. And the next, I want to show you a couple of projects that I have done over the last few years. Bayless, the next. This is, I call it to show a transit-based project. I had done an urban design project for Harlem, 425th Street, where New York Central Railroad came along Park Avenue and divided Harlem in half. It's a raised rail. It has to be raised because of the grading as you approach the Bronx. And I created or designed a enclosed tube for the tunnel and a mixed-use project with housing on the east and some office and commercial space on the west. It involves a hospital, some medical space. It involves a theater and a school within the megastructure, and the streets run through underneath it. And what it does is it binds the east and west together, and it's a multi-use project. That's the key to creating enough activity and serve the people in the neighborhood. When you spend this amount of money on a project, on a public project, you've got to include the needs, the health, the housing, the recreation, the education needs of the community. And I think this is next to final. Bayless, please. This is 11th Hill House, Boston Housing for the Elderly, obviously in Boston. It's a HUD project which I designed many years ago. It's 250 units. The building to the background, the upper right, or the right, was designed by another architect. It's 10 stories. It was called prescriptive housing. Everything was designed exactly to code. The neighbors complained. The neighbors in the area, this is in Brighton, Massachusetts, Brighton, Boston. There were 2- and 3-story houses and apartments. And so we designed a structure that was no surrounding courtyards, that was no higher. They went from 3 stories to 5 stories, no taller than that, to blend in with the neighborhood. And it also was, I say, built by, was for 250 apartments for the elderly. Majority of apartments, or let's say 60%, 70% have direct outdoor space. We threw out the HUD regulations and we designed this for what I call universal design, to meet the needs. So we eliminated kitchen cabinets above the stove and sink, and we provided a pantry closet instead. We provided lever handles on the entry doors and the doors of the apartment, and got rid of the knobs, which people can't handle, and so on. So we HUD didn't, and we increased the size of the HUD standards 10% overall. And this project won a Boston Society of Architects housing for award for housing and neighborhood design, and it was exhibited in Washington, D.C. at the International Symposium for Social Gerontology. And just to show it's cost effective, we designed this 10% below. We built it, not designed it. We built it for 10% less than HUD allocated. And so the fund, so we had 10% left over. So we put it back into the project in landscaping and embellishments in the lobbies and other amenities for the residents. So it's possible to design something carefully and build it for less. So I think the next slide just says, Bayless, please. Yeah, and I'm open now to any questions. If you want to contact me, is my email address. I hate to solicit at a time like this, but I'm doing this project and design pro bono, and I like to continue in depth. And and so if there's a way to assist in the funding for this design, we'll set up a nonprofit, and we'll welcome anyone who wants to assist in furthering this effort. So thank you very much, and any questions or comments, please, you're welcome.
Cool. You want to take down the slides, Bayless, and and we'll bring up the view, public view. And so I can see, yeah. So Alex has his hand up and Luana does too. I don't know who's first, but go.
Mine's fast.
Okay.
So for the senior citizen housing in
Thank you. A
Boston.
little louder, I just can't hear you.
Yeah. For the senior citizen housing in Boston,
Yes,
you mentioned that you improved on the HUD code, but then 10 seconds earlier, you said you threw out the HUD code. So is that just a figure of speech, or did you improve on the HUD code?
that's a figure of speech, but what we did, I don't know if we can say we threw it out. I think we exceeded it. That's what I'm saying. We went beyond what they call the minimum. The HUD has what they call minimum property standards, and the minimum property standards are just that, minimum. And a lot of architects and developers design to the minimum, and we didn't stop at the minimum. We used our heads and we figured, well, what's the best way to do these things and do it in a more, according to universal design. And universal design means designing for what is comfortable for people to live, but how they live, how they move through the space. Design it according to universal design and not just follow, the minimum I'm sorry they call it the minimum property standards, but I think when HUD says minimum, they're meaning this is the least, and that includes the square footage is their minimum standard and everything that goes through it. And from windows to cabinets to hardware to community space, we try to think about what's appropriate and exceed the minimum and make the place more comfortable and a better place to live. And so we didn't throw them out. We just said,
we'll do some extra, is what you're saying.
We'll do some extra. Yeah, we'll do some extra. Right?
Yeah, most developers want to meet the minimum because it adds, it's about costs and profits. Luana, you have
Yes, thank you, John. Thank you, Harvey. Thank you, Bayless, for your presentation. Harvey, I was concerned about, I like parts of your project, but I'm concerned about a part of your project. A part of your project includes block 780 and the displacement of those residents that reside on block 780. We've been fighting with Renato for over 3 years now in reference to the residents that live on that block and want to stay in their homes. And I'm concerned about the part of your plan that talks about relocation and mitigation of block 780. So could you explain a little bit more? I don't know if you know the history of the protests and the fighting that has been going on against Bernardo, and they're wanting to take over that block and demolish the whole block. So I'm concerned about that part of your plan. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, okay. There's several parts of why I show this in this preliminary urban design. Number one is technology. When the new tunnels come in, and they're going to come in south of the existing tunnels, when they come in, they can't come in, and the new tracks can't come in right where the existing tracks are, and platforms, because those platforms are in use. The tracks are in use. And the platforms that are there now are too narrow. And so I think Renato, let's forget about Renato, but the state said, well, we're going to bring this tunnel in. Where are we going to, where are we going to bring it? Where is it going to terminate? And it has to terminate somewhere. And it may have to terminate south of the existing Penn Station. We don't know. That's one issue. And so I very reluctantly show the demolition of anything, but it may be a fact that down the road, that's the only need to do it. Now, the other thing is another kind of this is a study in progress. If Madison Square Garden were to move, or when Madison Square Garden moves, and their columns that come down into the platforms below are eliminated, you know, I'm going to say, here's a plea to Dolan and kind of a fight. I said, Block 780 should blame Dolan, Madison Square Garden, for me suggesting we use their space. In other words, don't sue me or don't sue the state. Go talk to Madison Square Garden and say, would you please move out of the way so that we can maintain our own homes here? So the fight should not be against the state. I think it should be against Madison Square Garden. Those two
So,
entities-
Harvey,
Yeah.
what you're saying is if Madison Square Garden if it was moved, then the housing, there would be no danger with the housing being destroyed. And you're saying if the Madison Square Garden remains, then that's where the problem lies, and that's in order to bring those tunnels in, that's where and it's difficult to keep that housing block. Right?
That's exactly right. Exactly right. That's my
Okay.
understanding of the issue. And
So
it's-
what Luana is saying is we're dead set against anybody's housing.
Right. And the issue is, I think, I'm not sure, Harvey, if you're familiar with Rethink New York and Sam Turvey and the work he's done with the Gateway Project and through running. The plans that they have put in place it does include moving Madison Square Garden, and it did not include the displacement, the demolition of any homes on that block. So your plan is great. The plan for Block 780, I'm totally against that. So, but I want to thank you for the in-depth research you've done. Rethink New York has really been doing extensive work on the Gateway Project and the through running. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but definitely should connect.
No, I've believe me, I've spent a lot of time. I attended Sam Turvey's Cooper Union presentation. I met with Sam for 3 hours and went over everything with Sam about a year ago. I'm in contact with Sam. Layla Law and I have been in contact constantly. I've seen all her or a majority of her presentations on this. And I've been listening to all the proposals that were presented, and Andy Byford, I'm trying to reach him out and reach to him to find out exactly what is going on with the through running and how much that will cost and how it impacts everything, because I don't fully think that it's been, I don't think it's been thought out 100% at this point. So
what do you mean?
My experience with the Big Dig in Boston, it was a very successful project. It was planned to cost $2 or $3 billion and get done in a handful of 5 years. It cost $16 billion. It took many more years, 12 years, 14 years. I was displaced by it. Believe me, when you get involved with this project and it moves forward, the impact of what's going on is going to spread north and south, east and west. You're going to be rebuilding sewers and utilities and drainage and a lot of things. And it's going to take a lot longer than the feds are saying right now. Believe me, I won't be around when it's done, put it that way. And not because I'm leaving town, it's because I just may not make it that long. But I've experienced this. And when you get involved in the Big Dig, I was involved in what they call underwater Fort Point Channel crossing. When they get and I was an urban design consultant to an engineering firm, and mostly this is run by engineering firms. So that's all I can say. I just said and when you get involved in this team effort, like what they're doing with the Gateway Project, they involve every team member in an indoctrination of the entire project and all the regulations. Everybody knows everything about, and then you're assigned your segment of the work. and then you focus in on that. So when I say I did one part of it, I was involved in all the seminars, all the meetings, all the standards for the entire project. And and believe me, it's very complicated. So it's not. And let me just say one word about Vornado. Not that the office buildings for Vornado, the intention there was to help provide some funding for the Penn Station. I worked for Marcel Breuer in New York years ago, and I worked on the tower that was supposed to be in front of or on top of Grand Central Station. And it was not a crazy idea. It was a British developer. There was originally a tower planned to be on top of Grand Central Station, which was never built. But what the purpose of that tower was to provide, before Jackie Kennedy and the City Club came along, the purpose of that tower that Breuer and the developer was Morris Soddy. The purpose of that tower was to provide the fundings to restore and save Grand Central. It wasn't for a developer to make a lot of money. Obviously, the developer would make some money, but he had to spend a lot of money. And they hired a very good architect, Marcel Breuer. And I didn't go ahead for a number of reasons. Pan Am didn't want their view blocked, and Johnson, the architect, Philip Johnson, who was on the Preservation Commission, also didn't like the idea of what Breuer was proposing. But the idea was it was going to provide the funding to restore Grand Central. And luckily we had Jackie Kennedy and City Club come in and take the lead. And we need someone like that for Penn Station. We need a Jackie Kennedy or
Harvey, you're going to have to work hard to sell me that it wasn't all about the developer, needing helping. You're going to have to sell me really hard on that issue, but that's another conversation.
Okay.
I just have one last thing. I think when you said, Harvey, in your presentation that this project includes the needs of the community and the need to stay in the homes, I think that this is relevant to Block 780 staying the way it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you don't tear.
I hear you.
Yeah, you don't tear something down in order to offer something else. It's just it's a scam, and when you do that, I'll give you this. It's like they're talking about the GPP adding housing to the GPP. No, you don't add the housing to the GPP. You get rid of GPP and you start thinking about housing. I don't think developers had really any issues about wanting to build a building and the government helping them. I think the government has shirked their job just like they did with NYCHA. And as far as having the money and building these infrastructures, that's what they're supposed to do. Anyway, to move on, I got Robert and Marnie with questions. Rob, I don't know. I think you were next. Yeah.
Thank you, John. Can you guys hear me? I'm on a public bus. So. Okay. Harvey, thank you for your presentation. Just quickly, I teach in a architectural and master's degree program at the New School. I'm on my way to that program now to review students' projects. And what we do is try to implement alternative ways of development and progressive ways of development. So I'm very interested in what you do and possibly bringing you in to speak to students in the future. But I also have ties to National Low Income Housing Coalition, National Alliance to End Homelessness. And I think these are national groups that can help lift up the way you operate. And I think that's important and probably bring you connections to HUD. I also have high level access to HUD. So I would love to just have a conversation with you. I'm going to reach out to John to get your email address so that you and I can have a one-on-one conversation. I think there's a lot we can do together to lift up, an alternative way of development. We know it's a struggle in New York City, but I think there are also opportunities outside of New York City to bring in alternative ways of development. So I just want to say that and just thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the time.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
I'm glad you were here to see that and offer that. Marnie?
Yeah, well, if somebody was trying to like demolish my home, I would fight like hell. But anyways, and John, you've seen this before, and probably some people on the call have seen this, but Andrew Berman has this wonderful presentation about how, the way development is being done now is like the Soho NoHo rezoning is to, demolish existing, affordable units, especially in Chinatown, in order to build new. So I think that's something that the city is doing, and it's, somebody's making money off of it. And I just think there should be a moratorium on any if you're living in an affordable unit, I don't understand what the justification is. So I think there should be a moratorium on that. But also one thing is I'm wondering, I've heard that the new gateway tunnels may take 15 years to build at maybe like $50 billion. And I wanted to ask about that. And then also it would dump probably an additional 300,000 commuters on Manhattan's West Side, in addition to the already 600,000 people coming in. So that's a colossal amount of people. And, if you bring that many people in, it seems like it really opens the door for, more luxury residential towers to come. Nothing of any sort of real affordability. So what you do is you really change the character of the neighborhood. So much so like we have Hudson Yards, then they want to demolish NYCHA and put up luxury towers there. Then we have this. And it just seems like the whole neighborhood is going to be just not affordable for anyone. So I just wanted Harvey to comment on that.
Yeah, and to tack onto that, I'm going to
Well,
tack.
can I comment back? Well,
Sure, Harvey.
First of all, I agree. Demolition, we have a climate crisis. The carbon footprint of tearing things down and building them new is not acceptable. So yes, I'm in every project that I get involved with, we look at retaining the existing structure, reducing the carbon footprint, dealing with the issues of sustainability. That's almost number one target of what we try to do. So I agree, we don't want to tear things down. As far as more people are concerned, that's some of the reason why I was expanding Penn Station for the future. You're going to say we're designing for the next 60 years. More people may be commuting into the city. It's going to maybe need a larger facility. I don't know. I leave that to the train station designers. I'm an urban designer. I'm more at the conceptual level right now. But yes, there will be an increase in population. Now, the issue of affordability is, again, paramount in everyone's mind. No one can afford to live in New York or anywhere. Young people can't buy a house. Old people are running out of money. They can't afford to live. So it's a national crisis, and it's a crisis in New York. So the architects and planners and the government and the community groups have to put their heads together and figure out how, and the idea of an alternative way of development we were talking about 10 minutes ago. We have to figure out how we're going to provide for people to live and live where they work and live where they go to school. And so, yes, it's a problem, and it's a universal problem, and we need to work on it together because for all the issues, and there's so many issues. Urban designers are kind of an umbrella type of education, and we try to bring together all the issues: the housing, the people, the politics, the community, the architects, landscaper. We're the umbrella. We try to organize everybody to come around the same table. And so, yes, but affordability, there are three things that are issue right now. One is affordable housing, two is healthcare, and three is sustainability and climate change. And those three challenges are not being addressed properly by anybody, and developers or cities or the government, state or federal. They're not being addressed properly. And and we can't rely on them to come up with the solutions. And I said, community groups, as what you are, is where we have to start working at it. But we've got to bring together the people who have some technical knowledge too, not only in cost, not only in environment, not only in design, and not only in transportation, and not only in healthcare. You got to bring all these people around the same table. So I agree 100% that and don't tear anything down that you don't have to tear down. Every brick that you have to take to the dumpster is costing too much money. And if you're going to build new, build it to last. Don't build it cheap. And how do you do that? Well, that's what we try to do. We try to build it to last.
That's a very good point. You go down and see all these new construction there. Some of them are very, basic structures, nothing really creative, and it's a lot of glass. And
yeah, and what I really worry about is just seeing what's going on with public housing is the tenants really don't have a seat at the table. They never do.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then I think everybody should fight like hell. And a lot of those tenants are not going to leave. They're going to barricade themselves in their apartments, and they're not going to leave when the bulldozers come. And I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, if somebody was, you might do the same thing if somebody's threatening your home, so.
Yeah, exactly.
The tenants never have a seat at the table. So I don't know. That's just that's never going to happen. Ever.
No, it's going to happen. I'm from Boston. I worked with 12 different housing authorities, Boston Housing Authority, various housing authorities for 35 years, doing everything from renovation, new construction, veterans housing, elderly housing, group homes, everything. And we may want to bring in Boston seems to be at the cutting edge of a lot of these concepts and ideas. New York is big, but it not be at the cutting edge.
And corrupt.
And corrupt. Well, everything, Boston, I won't say Boston's not corrupt. I don't, but I think that there's we could find some, and I say I'm from Boston. I'm not ashamed of it. Although I was born in New York, but I love that city, and I've been very much involved. There's an organization called the Citizens Planning and Housing Association it's called CHAPA in Boston. I was a member of that. And we came up with, I was on a committee, did a study. We did a study for affordable low-income elderly housing. And the committee came up, we had an attorney, a real estate attorney lead that group. And we came up with a 7-part program to put enough funds together to build low-income elderly housing. And I think it still would work. So there are solutions. We just need to work at them.
We have we're kind of running to a close here. We have a couple of questions. Theodore, and then Carol's been might want to make a comment. She's been making some comments. I'm sorry, Carol, I'm just not a good manager managing the chat and so forth. But anyway, why don't we go to Theodore, and then we want to start to think about closing.
I would like to thank Harvey for an urban design conceptual plan that thinks of the entire neighborhood. And actually, I think when we look at the west side of Manhattan, in the long run, from really the 50s down, including Port Authority, major changes are occurring. And I think it's essential.
Yeah, I've been listening to this.
Like Harvey, to conceptually think about the entire neighborhood and some bigger plans looking far into the future. I think there are plans that are not being pursued that take buses totally away from coming into Manhattan and going on Manhattan streets. And I think those should be investigated more. with Port Authority. And I think all of those neighborhoods are going to change. I think the connection to Highline, the unfortunate destruction of the Pennsylvania Hotel is really a pity, just like Penn Station was. And we have to stop tearing things down and start thinking long-term. The through running is important, which would allow Queens and the Bronx to relate not only the New Jersey connections. So I think all of that is long-term, but it's essential that we think that way. And so thank you, Harvey, for broadening our thinking on the Penn Station area. Let's think what Manhattan will need, and that might even include upping the density in Long Island and Westchester, so that people can live and commute comfortably to Manhattan for work. And that's all I should say.
Yeah, that's a nice summary, Theodore. Where are you from? What are you? Tell us a little bit about you.
I'm housing guy as well, and have had a practice here for since before you were born, probably. And I'm with Perkins Eastman now, and work with Harvey on subcommittee for the AIA New York Planning and Urban Design Committee.
Okay.
And have been members of those committees, housing and planning and urban design, for again before you were born.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not that young. But I felt that you had a lot of insight, you were very involved, and we appreciate that.
Well, can I add something? I know Ted, but Ted, I would consider is an expert in housing and affordable housing. And I enjoy listening to him, and he's been one of my mentors because he is older than I am. So thank you, Ted, for those kind words as well.
Ted, you don't look that old either. You look nice and healthy there. So you're making me feel like maybe you have been around since
85 today.
85, okay. Today. Well, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Everybody's clapping for you. That's nice. Okay. All right. So let's Carol, did you have anything to add? I know.
I don't see her anymore.
Oh, she must have stepped off. Yeah, we're starting to lose. Okay.
Quick question though about the senior citizen housing. I'm sorry to keep going back to that, but Harvey and Ted, so is that specific project with the senior, I forgot what it's called, Lieberman housing? But
Leventhal.
Leventhal, yes.
No.
So is it permanent housing, or is there some sort of, like, I don't know the typical structure for senior citizen housing, like?
I'll tell you, it was under the 236 HUD program. This was built a number of years ago. It was Norman Leventhal who was provided the seed money for it. It was he's no longer with us. He and his brother started Beacon Construction, and their places in his donations, his what do you want to call it, has given money for, there's a park under his name. He's an MIT person, MIT graduate. This was done under the Combined Jewish Philanthropies of Boston. So the housing is a regular elderly affordable, it's a low income elderly housing program. If you look back at 236, there was 321D, but this is 236. It's a little more flexible. And then the next phase was built under Mass Housing Agency, a different agency. One of the key things, just in Boston, what they did was Mass Housing Agency believed in mixed income developments. So anyone, you could be earning $20,000 a year, you can be earning $150,000 a year. You have the same apartment as the next person. And it's not like the way they do now here. The developer will build luxury housing, and then he's required to build 10 or 20% of the units somewhere else that are built much cheaper or much poorly, much lower standards. This is the Boston had a mixed income housing program, and your neighbors, what you earn doesn't mean it doesn't indicate how smart you are or how well intentioned you are. It's just that some people are more fortunate than others. So the elderly housing was meant for a need. I think these were a lot of the Holocaust survivors who were in Boston, whose probably neighborhoods were torn down. The history of Boston. I think it's the North End is the Italian end, the East End was all torn down, and some developer and some mayor decided they were going to build towers there. Once that happened, and people were horrified in Boston, they preserved the North End as the Italian district, the South End, and so on. If you go and look at Back Bay, if you look at the development of Boston, you'll see what happened. And once we make a mistake in Boston, we don't do it again. We never make the same mistake twice. So we do make mistakes in Boston. So I started there in 1970 and I came to Boston to work with the dean of Harvard, Jose Luis Sert. I was an associate partner in his firm for 5 years, and he's an urban design. If you look up Jose Luis Sert, you'll see he's an urban designer. He has roots back to European international style in Europe, and he developed the urban design practice at Harvard. He started it, and instead of going to Harvard, I went to work for him for 5 years and learned about urban design and housing, and that's the best place. And it was a firm that I joined there with 15, 20 people. And when I left there were 80 people. It was a growing firm. And then when he passed away, they closed the office. He didn't want his name on buildings that he was not aware of present. So the answer to elderly housing, it can be built. Through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts had an excellent program. They had competitions for housing for the elderly. They were run frequently so that the best designs for certain sites were built by young architects with good ideas or new ideas. It wasn't always to give those firms a chance to get established. And there's a lot of the other thing about public housing is that the quality of the housing is and should be, and turns out to be a lot better than your standard housing because it's designed by architects and who are selected particularly for those projects, and it's not run by the developer. So the quality of public housing should be better and can be better than standard housing. And if Niger can't do it, then you need another way to get housing built in New York City.
Thank you, Harvey. Unless there's some real pressing questions, we have to close. We're way late. We'll get back to the 7A another time. We had a couple of items on the agenda we'll have to forego. Committee members and board members I'm looking for if anybody's interested. And outside of that, is there any last words? Any new people that first time on? I meant to kind of highlight you guys, and I do want your input if you have anything to say, even at this late stage of the meeting. I see a couple of new names. And anything? Anybody want to volunteer last words? No? Okay. Well, Harvey, it's a pleasure having you, and Bayless, you too. Thanks for joining us. I think I'll put you in touch with Rob. I think there's room for more discussions. And I like your thoughts on public input being very, very valuable. It is. I mean, that's what we should be building the city for. It's meant to be for the public's growth, not for a piggy bank. With that, I'll close. Thank you again, and we'll see you back first of next month, and first Tuesday of next month, and we'll speak again.